For HR leaders, managing payroll, compliance, and benefits across states can feel endless. Deal PEO tackles it all, so you can focus on people, not paperwork. You'll get Fortune 500 level benefits for your team, plus a dedicated HR partner to guide you every step of the way. Try it now. Get up to 3 months free at DEEL.com/SHRM.
Welcome to All Things Work. I'm your host, Ann Sparaco. It's that time of year again, employee performance review time. I can already hear the groans, so let's face it, these reviews have a reputation for being a bit stressful, time-consuming, and honestly, sometimes not that useful, but it doesn't have to be that way. So joining us today to discuss this and to help your organization move from paperwork and pressure to clarity, coaching, and real development are two HR leads at SHRM focused on talent and employee experience. Welcome to All Things Work, Payten Kirby and Jay Jones.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Great to have you. So for so many employees and managers out there, let's just jump right into it. Why do performance reviews feel like going to the dentist in the corporate life?
Well, too often performance reviews feel like a once a year event, and it can be really, disconnected from real work. They're treated as more of a compliance checkoff than a conversation, and that causes, a natural issue. There's a lack of clarity, there's a lack of consistency, relevance to what we're doing in our day-to-day work. There can be fatigue from, vague, back-looking conversations. So it's really about making sure that it's, Here's probably talk about this quite a bit, but making sure it's a continuous conversation that's more of a moment in time where we can have a specific moment to talk about this rather than the
Right.
once a year that we discuss it. I mean, that way we can make sure that there's no dread or heading to the dentist. We just want to make sure that there's the right mindset tools, and putting those in place really allows us to make sure that the conversation is really powerful one that gives us opportunities to build trust, foster growth, and really recognize the impact of the work that everybody's doing all year long.
Yeah. Building off of that, when you've got a culture of continuous feedback, one-on-ones, postmortems on events or projects, what went well, what didn't, that is then a performance conversation, and that feedback is being received and implemented throughout the year. So then there are no surprises. Kind of takes the pressure off of the feedback deliverer of having to write a whole year's worth of performance, and reduces that anxiety of the feedback receiver when they can trust that their manager is not going to throw any surprises in there because they have been receiving this real-time feedback all year.
Yes, trust is so big. And so we know that the workplace evolves every single day, if not every minute, it feels that way. Going back to that traditional approach, what exactly is really broken about that? Maybe that has not evolved with the workplace and what's surrounding the workplace.
Broken so strong. It's just about making sure you have this honest developmental conversation. People need to be able to feel like they have a standing in where their career is going and opportunity to grow within it. And that can't be something that feels rehearsed or compliant. That's just not a way to really build confidence and connection with your team. So it's really about making sure that it's not a one size fits all checkbox, and more of a conversation around how you can really impact your team, your organization, how you can build the right skills that are going to make you successful in the future. And that has to be a candid conversation that every manager has the tools to feel they're comfortable having that with their team. So broken is really more, we have to put more of a focus on it before that conversation happens, and that's a continuous conversation that we're having all year long, rather than this one moment that can cause a lot of anxiety and disruption if it's not something that we're focused on as a unit and organization.
Yeah, going back to what Jay mentioned previously about consistency, when you have consistent expectations in your job descriptions, you're able to measure performance against that, provide feedback based on that. And I don't know that performance is necessarily broken or that performance reviews are broken, especially with how many different avenues people are taking with performance evaluation and performance management these days. But it really is about being able to set those clear expectations pursuant to organizational objectives rather than this very potentially biased evaluating an individual in a vacuum based on their individual performance and individual strengths and weaknesses compared to modeling performance management after organizational objectives.
And I would love to put a little magic in here. If you had a magic wand, sprinkle it over, and you could redesign performance reviews from scratch, knowing what you guys know in your experience, what would you keep, toss, or let's say maybe set fire and really set to the side so they can meet the needs of today's modern workplace?
To Jay's point, I would certainly keep the synchronous review of performance. Let's, talk about skills gaps. Let's talk about gaps in your performance and design solutions together. That's where the real ROI happens on performance reviews, is being able to build that relationship and also build out a plan for execution. What I would probably like to set fire to, if I can use one of my favorite phrases, it's probably any performance review that is overly tedious or is trying to control for too many factors. If your end user is not taking this seriously or is, treating this as a check in the box compliance measure, or is, otherwise not going to take their data input seriously, the data that you get out of that process as an organization, whether that's for talent mobility purposes or identifying organizational skills gaps to close, is just not going to be reliable. So I would probably set fire to any performance reviews that are not user friendly.
I'd toss anything that is generic in the process. It's perfectly fine to have a rating scale where if that's something that makes things clear, concise for the team. But you also want to make sure that you're having a tailored conversation with this person. It's already something that can feel anxious, especially if you don't have that built into your culture to have that continuous developmental mindset, those continuous conversations throughout the year. Everyone's working towards that for sure. But you want to make sure you have a spot where your management team can really reflect on the qualitative things that this person has really done at a high level throughout the year, and also where they can express specific examples of how they really excelled, or maybe had an opportunity in whatever it is their focuses were for their goals, or how they were trying to implement their team's culture into what they're trying to accomplish throughout the year. So I'd really scratch anything that takes the I guess the genuineness out of the conversation
Mhm.
and make it personal, purposeful, and really future focused.
Peyton and Jay getting the matches out. Okay. Just kidding, folks. So when it comes to really the HR side, to make these performance reviews, feel more useful and perhaps even enjoyable rather than just kind of this bureaucratic maze for employees, what are some real practical steps HR professionals can take today to take into consideration to make this more useful and enjoyable?
Well, everybody loves development. So hanging on to that developmental piece of, you're not doing fantastic in this area, or,
Mhm.
we're not seeing effective dedication in these tasks. Let's talk about this plan to get from A to B. Or conversely, you're doing fantastic in your role. Let's talk about your long-term career objectives. Keeping that developmental piece is really important. I think also making it less of a bureaucratic maze. I have already given you my soapbox on overly tedious end user experiences, but generally, if you are an HR professional and you are managing the performance management process, being able to tie that back again to some sort of objective benchmark, whether that's a job description, maybe of a competency framework, taking away that subjectivity and taking the onus off of the individual manager and their individual judgment and placing it on a standard benchmark will, not only increase fairness, but reduce anxiety for everyone involved when everyone's got the same definition of expectations.
Yeah, I'll double down on what Peyton started off there was in terms of just really simplifying the tools and the language. Everyone hates it when their technology doesn't work. If you ever had your Wi-Fi go down, so you just want to make sure that it's as simplified as possible. So if the process takes 5 million clicks to get into, or we're making it a little bit too complex, so make sure you have the
Yeah.
right tools in place to make the process as smooth for both manager and employee. And then you also just want to make sure that you're focused on the impact overall and not necessarily the process. You want to build around how people are contributing to their mission culture. You don't want to focus on really the tasks that they have to complete throughout the year. And then also feeling prepared. If you've done anything that's brand new to you, Everyone feels uncomfortable. Some people feel like they can jump right into it, and some people feel like there's absolutely no way I can make this happen. So, you want to make sure that your team is prepared on both ends in terms of how your staff can write a really effective review that
Mhm.
their manager can use to really evaluate their process, maybe even bring up some things that they forgot about, because guess what, they're human too. And making sure that the managers and team and the staff are prepared to do that is really important, and that will help reduce friction. It'll elevate the process overall and really make something that people are looking forward to rather than have to endure when they get that email from HR.
And I think that transitions well into our conversation about managers. They feel this particular type of pressure and responsibility. We understand that, especially as a lot of companies, tend to be laying off employees. They want to make sure what they're saying and what they're writing in these performance reviews are accurate and not risking anything, I guess, in particular. I think that would be my concern if I were a people manager. What advice for these types of managers who may be sweating bullets when it comes to these performance reviews would you provide them to feel less stressed and maybe even more prepared? You talked about just kind of that personal connection, that trust with the individual employee, but I'd love to hear more.
Well, first, I'd say just to do everything you can to take the pressure off yourself with your answers. It's not about delivering this perfect one-way conversation. It really should be a two-way dialogue between yourself and the people on your team. So start by taking a hard look at their self-reflections. That will give you a hard frame for your conversation, and probably give yourself some insight to things that you may have forgotten about throughout the year. And that will really build trust, because you'll be able to lay out specific examples of how well they did or specific areas where they need to improve. Instead of just a generic, you did a great job, you'll be able to really line up, this is the project that you had a real impact on. And here's the area where you really had a great impact on the team or the organization overall. And doing that really displays how prepared you are for the conversation. People, we have smart and curious people on the team, right? And they're going to be able to see through how prepared you are for the conversation. And just like anything else that, someone is doing for the first time, whether it's the first time you're delivering this conversation or you're a pro and a vet, you've done a million times, they'll be able to hear that the time and investment that you've put into being prepared for this conversation and being able to really interlock with them as far as how we're going to build from here, whether that's building on things that they've done really well, they're a rock star, or there's specific areas that you're laying out for them that you need to see from them for the upcoming performance year.
One roadblock that I've seen a lot in preparation or have heard from a lot of managers in every industry is that they just manage too many people to write and deliver effective performance reviews. So as your team is growing, really think about, okay, come performance review season, when I've also got the budget process going on and I have my own deliverables, can I effectively manage and write reviews for, 10, 12, 15 people? Maybe not. And so not every manager has complete agency over how many people they manage, but if you are fortunate enough to be in that seat, it might be time to rethink your team structure.
That's a really good point to make that I didn't even think of until now. The number of people managers oversee, it can be very overwhelming for them. And trying to keep up with what they're doing to ensure that their performance review is accurate is also
Yeah.
a
Quality
challenge
over
in itself.
quantity is a tough balance.
For
It
sure.
really is. Managers, kudos to you guys. Wow. Okay, so I would love to jump into the technology side as we know there's just so many advancements coming out in the workplace. So, how exactly can HR professionals really utilize technology to the best of its ability to make the performance review process smoother and even more engaging for both the manager and the employees?
That's a great question. There's so much technology out there now. But as HR's role is evolving to be more of a strategic partner to the business, you do have budget considerations. And so you have to think about what is a priority for your organization. How can you pitch the ROI of performance reviews,
Right.
especially if they have not previously been seen as something that's useful and effective? So you may need to think critically, especially at smaller companies, about more of a maturity model for building that business case. So if you today have really tedious, lengthy performance reviews that are seen as sort of a check in the box because HR makes you versus something that is useful and informative and really drives your business forward, then you might want to start with the process itself, even if that means more manual work for you, because it'll help you sort of pitch the case for that budgetary opportunity later to maybe acquire a performance review system that can help you manage performance. Some of them have AI implemented now, but really making sure that your performance review process is user friendly and actually impactful will really help you drive the business case for adopting performance management technology.
Yeah, yeah, and piggybacking on what Peyton said there, far as impact, you want to make sure that it's something that seamlessly works for you and your organization, because again, there's no one size fits all for everyone. It's great if it can be something that's real time, where you can capture real time feedback, and that's something that's built into your culture as something that you use day to day. Again, really moving your culture towards something that makes this a continuous conversation, not just the one time a year or when we're sitting down to talk about performance reviews. So if it can nudge the team to have those conversations, and they even provide prompts to the manager to help out with being able to start those, especially if they're a newer people manager. And that can be something that can really amplify the conversation, amplify the experience, and not necessarily make this ABC conversation that everyone needs to have, so the box is checked at the end of the year. And that really helped make sure that we're growing the dialogue around continuous improvement, rather than having this anxious conversation about whether or not I met the goals I didn't know about for the entire year.
Exactly. And like you said, you don't want to just make it so you just check off a box,
Yes.
and you don't want to make it so that you're just looking backwards to see what happened, about what went right or wrong, but
Mhm.
instead you really want to utilize this to really create more of a crystal ball effect where you're looking for continuous growth and development that will lead to that success. So, what are some other ways organizations can move away from that looking behind you and more looking forward? I'm sorry, I got Timon and Pumbaa in my head, like put your past behind you, kind of
Thanks for
thing. So if anybody
looking
likes
out
The
of your
Lion
warm
King
for the
like
rest of the
me,
day.
you put your past behind you. And I guess, yeah. So that's the phrase. So how can organizations really look ahead, as Timon would say?
That's a great question. And this is something that I think traditional performance reviews have started to adopt and are aiming toward, is to have that, looking forward, what's there to improve on, or what goals do you have for yourself next year? But that doesn't necessarily mean anything, or is not going to be impactful if you don't have a culture of continuous improvement where it is expected that you take feedback, implement it, and are given the opportunity to improve. If you've got a culture that has low psychological safety, low trust, people aren't necessarily given the opportunity before punitive action might be taken if they aren't meeting expectations, then you're not going to have a lot of follow through on that future looking performance review.
Yeah. Yeah. And that psychological safety that Peyton talked about is really key. So when you're trying to make sure you're looking forward, it's best to try to flip that question on its head. It's really important to reflect on how you perform, but really we want to focus forward on, what are you going to be doing next? Because that's a journey that hopefully the people manager and the employee are going to be taking together. So it's about asking, what are your strengths going to be, what you can really double down on to show how you can impact the team for the rest of the year. What gaps can we tackle together, and what resources and tools do you need so that we can make this process for you easier? You can excel your role at an even higher level. That's how we can start making sure that you build that psychological safety that Peyton's talking about, and that we're focused rather than the rearview mirror that you talked about, Ann, and we're on the road forward together.
Yeah. Managers don't need to be L&D professionals in order to get employees from A to B on skills gaps or performance gaps. They just have to be willing to lean into some of that.
Exactly. I love the point of psychological safety. It's so important. You're starting out as a team. You want to maintain your team. You want your team to be part of it and want to be part of it. So I think that psychological safety point, doubling down on that is so essential. So I would love to dive into a little bit on data. So we know data is everywhere, but not all of it is really that helpful, especially in the age of AI now and all these advancements. What information is actually helpful for managers to include in reviews, and what information is really not so helpful?
Yeah. So there is a lot of information out there. We do again ask you to go look back at your one-on-one notes, take performance feedback from throughout the year. Some teams lend themselves more heavily to KPIs than others. For example, sales and customer service have more of a KPI-driven performance structure than some other teams. So making sure that you're bringing in those specific examples. However, if you are going to use AI, one, data security is really important. So maybe scrub names before you throw anything into ChatGPT. But if you do have this amalgamation of documentation of performance throughout the year, that in a perfect world, we all would, if you're documenting your one-on-ones, which I don't know is quite standard practice just yet. But if you have all that information, AI can be a really good tool to summarize themes and areas that have shown improvement, areas that have maybe fallen by the wayside or been inconsistent.
Yeah, and just make sure that the data you use is telling more of a story, and that we're not just cutting and pasting the KPI that we have in this performance area that you're filling out for your team. Just make sure that, again, I think Peyton mentioned earlier about giving yourself the time to really sit down and consider your review, especially if you have a larger team. So making sure you're grabbing that data and you're turning that into qualitative feedback that really ties, what the goals are for that role, for that position, to the person and the goals that they have for themselves, which ultimately should be helping your organization overall. And that really makes it easier, not just for the employee to understand where they fit into accomplishing the goals of your organization and for your team, but it also makes everyone feel really comfortable in terms of understanding the direction that we're trying to go in together. So data, you're right, super important to have, but we need to use it to make sure that we're using it to interpret how we can build together and not just a judgment tool off of whether or not you are a 5 or a 1 when we're filling out the performance review.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people can rely easily on ChatGPT to make their review, whether it's performance or other performance reviews, kind of sound more professional. So I think that's another thing people try to use, but it's always important to use your human intelligence. Don't forget that in wake of AI. So,
Ritual?
okay, switching back to the employee side, I think it's really easy to fall into a mindset that we as employees don't really have much control when it comes to these performance reviews, as this can make us feel a lot like we're under a microscope. So, what role should employees play in flipping that mindset and shaping their own performance review and growth goals?
A central role. I'm so glad you asked that question because the best performance reviews aren't top down. They're authored, excuse me. When you have the opportunity to write your performance view, first of all, hopefully you're keeping track of all of the accomplishments that you've had throughout the year. So it's not like harking back to try to remember all that. But you're reflecting on your achievements. Hopefully you have an organization where you can speak very candidly about the challenges that you experienced and what growth that matters to you, but also ties to the organization. When you take the time as an employee, because most of us that aren't just, if you are a people manager, you're usually filling out a performance review for yourself that someone else is going to review. You want to make sure that you're a real active participant and not just how you performed previously, but how you're going to grow in your role forward. And that helps to make sure that, one, you feel empowered in the conversation that you're having and when your goals are being set beyond that conversation. But you're also in line with your manager as far as the vision that you have for everything that you need to accomplish for the rest of the year going forward.
Yeah, to build on Jay's point, being really honest with yourself and evaluating your performance from your manager's perspective, you should be the first one to point out the things that you need to work on. Think really critically about how you could be showing up better. None of us are perfect. And the distance between the, mental and emotional turmoil of providing somebody difficult feedback becomes way smaller when you're the first one to raise your hand and say, I feel like I need to work on this. Can you help me get there? So that's one way to sort of drive the conversation for the more remedial developmental areas of a performance conversation that can give us some of the biggest anxiety. And for those who are, crushing it, they really have a sense of direction for their career and they really want to capitalize on professional development opportunities or benefits that their organization is providing. You got to be thinking like an entrepreneur. You have to think about the business and how can you align your professional goals with either operational gaps that you see in the business or skills or strategies that your leadership has voiced are a priority so that you can make the most you can make the most out of a business case for your developmental plan. I would love to get my sommelier certification. There is unfortunately no opportunity for my employer to pay for that, as that is not part of my job. It's not going to be a part of my next job.
Right.
So keeping your developmental path and interest sort of aligned in any way
Right.
with your organization will be important.
Okay, so raises and promotions often hinge on performance reviews. We all know that, we're all feeling it. That's part of the pressure and stress in all of this process. And sometimes the how do I get there question just feels a little too enigmatic. So, how can HR professionals really help make this connection clearer so employees aren't really left guessing at the next level pathways?
I don't know. When I was getting ready for today, I think I was just watching a horror movie at the time. And I've shared this with Peyton before. Most horror movies I'm set for, but Paranormal Activity is one that's just like, I can't handle it. And I'm like, you can't fight what you can't see. I'm real into Bucks, Freddy or decent, but if someone's going to yank me, then I just can't. It makes me anxious. And feels the same for this. You can't really work towards something that you don't understand. There's not a clear pathway for, and you definitely don't want to feel like there's an insider's game in terms of how you can advance in your career. So clarity is key. You want to make sure that there's something specific that your staff can look at each level. You want to make sure you have defined skills, behaviors that you're looking for, and outcomes to advance. And you also want to make sure that you're making sure that that's in bright lights. It should be hard to find that information. It's something that every staff member should know well before they get into the performance review conversation. And doing that really gives someone who might not just have the natural capabilities to think of those things without the guide or the pathway set for them, to really excel at high level and be able to climb a ladder they can see and not the invisible one that they're not able to find on their own.
Yeah, it does take more effort on the front end to build out those consistent expectations. Again, whether that's competencies by level or you've got a skills first approach in your job descriptions.
Yeah.
But making sure that everyone knows how they can achieve success, whatever that looks like in their role or throughout your organization through career mobility or accessing their professional development benefits. When none of that information is readily available, people will make up reasons why people were promoted or not promoted in their head, and it will come back to bite HR and management.
All right, and I can't really relate to the Paranormal Activity.
Yeah, that's
I've never
all you
seen
guys.
it. There's a
Not
reason I
really.
haven't. I'm not a horror movie person. So, but
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you for another movie reference. I love it. Okay, so last question, which we like to call one small thing for HR leaders who want to ditch the dread and make performance reviews less overwhelming and more meaningful. What's the very first step that they can take today that you would recommend?
Going back to that culture of performance, you as a manager, whether or not this is aligned with your organizational culture, have the opportunity to build a culture of feedback on your team. So the more often you can provide real-time feedback and help people grow and build up those opportunities to build trust and see success throughout the year, the less anxiety-inducing those performance reviews are going to be for you and your team.
Absolutely. And, this is something where you can flip a switch on it right now. And that's just purely the language that you're using around performance reviews and performance overall. When you're getting to this time of the year, whether if it happens to be a one-time event for you and your organization, or whether it's quarterly or however often you do it, we want to make sure we're not focused on the compliance process or the process of completing the review. Instead, we're focused on, hey, here we're going to talk about how you're going to grow with us and moving forward and what we're going to be focusing on next. That really changes the conversation to something about being supported, being stretched in your role, and really stopping the dread from just having to have this conversation with your manager, and more of a forward-focusing conversation that you're both going to be doing together. And that's really where the transformation can move from exactly what Peyton was talking about in terms of it just being this anxious process to we're really doing this together, and we're just trying to figure out the best way to make that happen.
Awesome. Amazing stuff. All right. That's going to do it for this week's episode of All Things Work. Thank you so much, Peyton and Jay, for making this conversation just make us feel a little lighter when it comes to entering this performance review phase. We know it's daunting, but really your insights have truly helped a lot of us, feel a little bit better about it, maybe a little less anxious too.
Thank you for having us, Anne.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. I'm going to go do my performance review. If you enjoyed our conversation today, be sure to subscribe wherever you enjoy your podcast so you never miss a new episode. Also, did you know All Things Work is more than a podcast? That's right, we're also a weekly newsletter that includes in-depth articles and the latest research from SHRM to keep you in the know. Just head to shrm.org/allthingswork to sign up. Plus, follow SHRM on social media to view the latest clips and join the conversation on game-changing topics that are redefining the world of work.
HR teams, imagine one partner for U.S. compliance, payroll, benefits, and onboarding. That's Deal PEO. And right now, you can try it free for up to 3 months. Visit DEEL.com/SHRM.
SHRM.